live, I think.
Yep, we're live. What's up, Zach?
What's going on, guys?
Thanks for joining us for happy hour.
Man, I'm just so happy you guys invited me to hang out and talk about whatever comes up, but definitely keep everybody's eyes on the environment and on our water issues, even though we've got some other pretty trying issues on our radars right now.
Yeah, definitely. So how's it going, man? How are you doing? Are you working remotely or kind of back and forth, or what's your deal?
Yeah, so the Coastal Center has been shut down to the public for a little over a month now, and most of our staff, aside from our our direct animal care team, that we've all been working from home, and it's been challenging because so much of what we do is direct face-to-face contact with the community, talking about the environment, talking about issues that we're facing. And I think it's definitely been a little bit of a challenge to try to figure out how to do that from home. And we've been developing all kind of new educational content, and we've done some webinars and live broadcasts in the classrooms. But it certainly takes a little while to hit your stride with that type of stuff. But the backside of our organization is still going strong. We're still out there doing our restoration work and our environmental monitoring. It's really the environmental education and outreach side of what we do that's been set back by COVID-19.
Yeah, I hear that. We've seen having to, obviously replace that with a lot of digital stuff like what we're doing tonight. And now that we're 8 weeks into it, Daniel and I have halfway, I'd say about 70% figured out the technology stuff that makes happen. But
yeah,
way smoother than it was.
That's an understatement.
The first time we tried to do this. Yeah.
I saw that first one. That was unique.
This one could.
I didn't know that unique was a synonym for bad.
And I will say this could derail and go downhill at any moment. So.
I'm happy to see that you're not sitting in your car doing it. That's a positive.
Yeah. We're gonna try it from my living room this time. I live out kind of in the boonies, so I don't have the best Wi-Fi speeds. So I went around before this though, and turned the Wi-Fi off on my phone and iPad and my wife's computer. So hopefully that's not dragging down the matrix too bad.
They've been doing concrete work right outside my door all day with impact hammers. So thankfully that racket has ended just in time for this. We were getting a little bit nervous there towards the end of the day.
Nice.
Yeah. No, we definitely got some people starting to watch. I see Representative Heather Fitzenhagen joined in. Thanks, Heather, for tuning in. She's been awesome on our water issues, and definitely one of the people in Tallahassee that's been paying attention to this. So thanks for tuning in and hearing directly from the scientists. That's I think been one of the coolest things about these happy hours. And speaking of that, it's time to crack the beer here because we officially started. I promise this time it's actually my first one. Got a heady topper from The Alchemist. But yeah, it's great because we've had members from the governing board, legislators, all kinds of different folks tuning in, and Chris and I are always happy to be on here, but I think it just adds so much more, bringing in different guests and scientists like yourself, experts like yourself, Dr. Zach, to come in here and educate everybody.
Yeah, definitely. So I haven't mixed up a cocktail yet or grabbed a drink. I'm wondering what I should go for. Thinking of, we might have to do a fan choice here.
Uh-oh. I'm doing a Sailfish Sunrise City IPA right here from Fort Pierce. So trying to keep it
nice.
Semi-local.
There you go.
Yep. Drink
well, yeah.
If I get my fingers off the Sailfish.
and as soon as you get your drink together, Chris, or we might even have to do a toast. Heather just chimed in here. How about doing a toast to the EAA reservoir, which construction actually began on it today. There's, we've actually got, nice sticker on your cup there.
Yeah.
That's worthy.
Peanut gallery there, yeah. Yeah, so toast to that. EAA reservoir, that's something that we've been fighting on that since the very beginning, and finally today that was a huge step forward that there's actually some kind of construction beginning out there. So that's definitely good news, and hopefully we'll see that construction expedited, and we'll see a lot of these really critical projects start to move faster. And we actually have a couple more comments on here. Zach, if you want to give us a little kind of summary of what Florida Oceanographic is. Somebody just asked, Vic Chabra asked, what kind of monitoring does FOS do, and where can we see the data in real time? Can you just talk a little bit about what you guys do? I mean, I know you have the education center, but you're also partnered with, Orca, and, all those great organizations over there.
Yeah, for sure. So Florida Oceanographic Society is a 501c3 nonprofit. We're located in Stuart, literally right at the eastern outlet of the C-44 canal. So we're dealing with all these discharges coming out of the lake, and we're right on the Indian River Lagoon at the southern end of the IRL. And our organization's old. We've been around for 55 years, and a big part of what we do is integrating science and education and outreach. So we operate a public nature center, the Florida Oceanographic Coastal Center. We're open to the public. Once all this passes, you guys can come check us out and visit our center. We've got nature trail, all kind of cool aquarium exhibits. And one of the unique things that we do every single day is we get on microphone and we talk literally all day long about Florida's environmental issues. We're not like a zoo or an aquarium where you walk around at your own pace and you check out the creatures. We're on microphone throughout the day teaching people about the big problems that our state's dealing with. And I think it's one of the things that kind of sets us apart from other similar organizations. And then behind the scenes, we're really engaged in research and restoration. We have an active habitat restoration team that is focused on living shorelines and oyster restoration, seagrass restoration. I would argue that we probably have one of the largest captive seagrass colonies in the country. We have a couple thousand square feet of seagrass that we've grown in captivity from little fragments that we pick up off the beach at high tide. One of the classic methods of restoring seagrass was to go out, find a healthy seagrass bed, take a plug of seagrass and move it somewhere else. Well, the Indian River Lagoons lost more than 50,000 acres of seagrass in the last decade. We don't really have anywhere to go get healthy seagrass from to restore unhealthy areas. So by kind of figuring out how to grow seagrass from fragments, it gives us an opportunity to have a source of seagrass for restoration work. Our oyster restoration program is our oldest and most developed, but we're really spending a lot of time right now trying to figure out the intricacies of regrowing seagrass and getting it to take root once you put it back out in the wild. In places like Charlotte Harbor and the Indian River Lagoon, those historical seagrass beds, the root system kind of anchored the bottom down. And when the grass dies, the bottom's not anchored, so you can't just go stick new grass in without it washing away. So we're busy trying to figure out how best to restore those grass beds. And then as far as monitoring goes, we've got a great citizen scientist group of volunteers that do water quality monitoring from their backyards, basically. We have waterfront homeowners that have been helping us with this for years. Unfortunately, we don't have any real-time water quality data available, but our friends at Orca right up the road in Fort Pierce have Kilroy water quality monitoring stations deployed throughout the estuary. And like in the blink of an eye, you can go onto their website and see dissolved oxygen levels and salinity and blue-green algae levels at a number of sites throughout the estuary.
Cool. Yeah, and we actually had
Kilroy system up before.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to just take a moment here to pause. I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation. We've got 50 or 60 people watching right now. If everybody could do us a favor and share this live stream out or start a watch party, get your friends involved. We're gonna be discussing this for the next hour or so with Dr. Zach Judd from Florida Oceanographic Society. So please hit the share button, hit the watch party button, and let's get this rolling and get a bunch more people on here, because this is super important stuff. Learning about our water quality. I mean, our water quality is absolutely critical to our environment here, our quality of life. So if everybody could hit the share button right now, don't slack on it. Everybody means all 50 people that are on here. Let's get a bunch more people to tune into this.
So Daniel, how's your water been looking over there lately?
It's incredible. I actually I took my boat out of the barn for the first time since before Hurricane Irma. We've just been swamped with captain stuff and haven't really had the time. So I got it out of the barn, got it fired up, and it's rolling. So I've been spending a little bit of time, evenings here and there, and out on the water, and it's as good as I've seen it in 10 or so years, maybe longer than that.
Yeah.
Water's really clear. We're starting to see some grass growing back. And, one of the things I was telling Chris about the other day that I've noticed is last year, especially around the mouth of the Caloosahatchee River, San Carlos Bay, like right where those Lake O discharges dump out, we had a lot of sediment on the bottom. So anytime the wind blew more than 10, 15 miles an hour for like 3 or 4 days, it would just be real milky and nasty. And if it hit 20 miles an hour, you're looking at even longer than that. But because we had a pretty good year last year, low discharges, and didn't see those big plumes coming out there, it's significantly cleaner after a wind blow, both on the beach of Sanibel and in the back bay. So it just kind of goes to show you that, there's so many complexities to, how long these things last. That's just one little thing, that you notice. It's like, having, that sediment, giving it time to go out, that's we're going on 2 years without any, massive discharges. And, we're seeing more and more recovery every year, more and more resiliency. And, I'm sure there's a lot going on, at the microscopic level and underwater that we just don't know about. But it's definitely good to see, a lot of that sediment has either settled in or has flushed out to tide. But yeah, it's awesome. The fishing's great over here. It is, got a lot of little redfish around, a lot of snook starting to come back, seen a lot of small ones, had some great tarpon fishing this year. So
yeah,
no complaints there.
Seeing that recovery, we've talked about that before, Daniel, that the longer that these estuaries can be in a period of recovery, the faster they begin to recover. Just like collapse, the longer they're in a period of degradation, the faster the degradation happens, and the longer they're in recovery and given optimal conditions, the faster it starts to recover. And we're starting to see that. The first year, we're seeing a lot more signs of recovery the second year than we did that first year.
Though it's frustrating how often I hear from anglers or even scientists that we've passed a tipping point or that we're beyond the point of no return, and it's just not the case. We're certainly doing a good job of messing things up, but these systems are resilient, and when you give them a chance to try to recover a little bit, they certainly are able to recover. And that's even without bringing in the concept of restoration. If we just let nature do its thing and we stop harmful discharges and we start to eliminate some of these nutrient issues and we get water back in Florida Bay like it's supposed to do, things tend to want to rebound on their own. I mean, maybe it's just my optimism, but I don't think we've crossed that tipping point yet. I think we're awfully close in certain places. The Indian River Lagoon over here is a great example of an ecosystem that's just so close to collapse. But at the same time, when you give it a break and you've got a dry year and you don't have a lot of runoff coming into the estuary, things do try to recover.
Yeah,
definitely. So I think, the first time I really, that kind of phrase about the resiliency really hit with me, was talking to Magnus Gunnarsson. He used to be with Mustad Hooks. He's with, I believe, Savage. Mm-hmm. They make spinning gear now, lures. He's from Europe. He's European. And he's seen a lot of different fisheries, from salmon fishing in Europe to, Nova Scotia. He's spent a lot of time doing the salmon fishing thing, a lot of time traveling around. And, he said, his observation is that, this is global. It's not a Florida thing. It's what he's seen across the planet is that nature is very resilient. You just have to give it the opportunity. And I mean, I think that's exactly right. Like we can't expect it to be resilient if we're drowning it and destroying it. You have to give that opportunity for resiliency to be effective. It's no different than if you had the coronavirus. If you're not resting and charging hard, and you can't expect to recover from it. But if you are drinking your fluids and doing all your stuff, you have that better chance of resiliency. So it's I think that's a great way to put it. We have to give it the opportunity for that resiliency to work. It doesn't work on its own.
I guess the flip side of that, though, is that even though things are looking better right now, I mean, it's the best it's looked in a couple of years, it's still nowhere near where we want it to be. And I always worry that people become complacent. They go out, they get some good sight fishing days, they see a little bit of clean water, maybe a few sprigs of grass coming up, and it's easy to forget how good it was even a decade ago, let alone 30, 40, 50 years ago. So it's great to get a glimpse of clean water, and it's great to see some fish, and it's great to see habitat trying to come back a little bit. But we really need to keep our foot on the gas and make sure that this little glimmer of positive isn't just a glimmer. This is a track that we're moving forward on, and we continue to get better and better each year.
Yeah, definitely. And that's people's as time goes by, people's baseline of what a good ecosystem or a productive ecosystem is changes. What I saw in my lifetime versus what Daniel saw versus what somebody like Flip saw. We all have our own idea of when it was good, and so that baseline changes. And you're talking about people getting complacent that's a really important fact. That's one of the big things that we do with our outreach is to help people understand that when we start to see progress and we get in periods of recovery like this, that's no time to let your foot off the gas. Unfortunately, we're not out of the weeds. Fortunately, our waters are improving right now, but that's primarily because of some grace by Mother Nature, a little bit because of some management flexibility by the Army Corps the past dry season, but it's primarily the fact that we haven't had a ton of rain, and so we can't go through. We know we're not going to stay in a long-term period of recovery with by crossing our fingers and hoping that Mother Nature cuts us a break, because it's just a matter of time before we do get a lot of rain. That your coast and our coast feel the consequences. But right now, when we are in a period with not a lot of rain, our friends down in Florida Bay and Everglades National Park are starting to sweat. They're seeing the looming signs of happened in the past on the horizon with hypersaline conditions in Florida Bay, because that ecosystem desperately needs water. So the East Coast, the West Coast suffer in El Nino years and wet years, and the Everglades National Park and Florida Bay suffer in the dry years. And that's the big thing that we have to emphasize is we can't just let our foot off the gas or get complacent when one of these places looks good. We have to finish, complete, and push through Everglades restoration projects so that we return balance to that system as a whole. So we don't have a situation where Florida Bay is suffering. That's my attack dog. Florida Bay is suffering, or St. Lucie or Caloosahatchee River. It shouldn't be one or the other. We have to have all these places being able to thrive.
Well, and that's one of the challenges with these restoration goals. There are things you can do that will clean up little places and move water in certain areas, but when you really start looking at the overall goals of the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan, what's good for one system is good for another. If we can get water moving into the Everglades the way it's supposed to flow, we're gonna be providing a positive service for the sawgrass prairies and the marl areas and the mangrove shorelines, and we're going to help Florida Bay. And at the same time, with that water going south like it's supposed to go, we're going to have a positive impact on the Caloosahatchee and St. Lucie as well. I think one thing that always worries me is we spend so much time focusing on cleaning the water, right? It's got to be clean. And all too often people forget that Florida's issues are oftentimes about having water at the wrong time of year and the wrong quantity, not just the wrong quality. So, I mean, if you could clean it to a pristine state, but you're still dumping it into the Caloosahatchee and St. Lucie every year, and you're not getting it into Florida Bay every year, that clean water is just one small step along the way. We really need to find a way to get clean water back into the Everglades and Florida Bay and keep it out of the St. Lucie. And I think something that people might find interesting, why can't we just send the water south as is? There's a lot of water that we have, and certainly we could get that water into the Everglades, but the issue is it's dirty water, and it's dirty for a variety of reasons. There's a lot of nutrient scapegoats out there. We'll just say that. And whether we're talking malfunctioning sewage plants or septic tanks that don't work real well here in Florida, or this kind of agriculture or that kind of agriculture or that kind of agriculture, all those nutrients cause problems. And when you look at Lake Okeechobee, it's still getting lots of nutrients from certain sources. It's also got 100 years of legacy nutrients trapped in the muck. And so really, regardless of where those nutrients originated from, they're causing the water in the lake to be dirty. And one of the unique things about the plants that live in the Everglades is they've actually evolved to not want a whole lot of nutrients. They're not like our tomatoes that thrive when you throw a bunch of fertilizer on them. So if you take nutrient-rich water and you dump it into the glades, that's where we end up with problems like we've had in the past with cattails taking over the sawgrass prairie. So, all these efforts to move water south, they have to be couched into the idea that water needs to be cleaned. And that's where stormwater treatment areas come in. We've got this great network of 6 STAs in the Everglades, and they're doing a pretty good job of cleaning up agricultural water from the EAA. But the Everglades Agriculture Area Reservoir that Daniel mentioned at the start of our chat tonight, I mean, that's really what we need in order to start cleaning and storing some of the water coming out of Lake Okeechobee so it can get back into the glades and stay out of our estuaries.
Yeah, you're right. We routinely see that a lot of people focus on the nutrient. You have nutrient aspect, and then you have the conveyance aspect. And the nutrient aspect a lot of times is a little more visual, the algae blooms and stuff like that. But putting the water in the wrong place or restricting water from the places it needs to be are every bit as detrimental. And the point of needing to clean the water before we send it down there is we don't want to create another problem to deal with down the road, in an effort to fix this. So that water must be cleaned before it's sent south. That's part of the EAA reservoir. It's part of Everglades restoration. And so that's a really good thing for people to keep in mind is nutrient loading and conveyance are both equally as important but they're not solved by the same things in the same way. So they both need to be addressed.
One of the big challenges, even in the environmental world, there are environmental organizations, there are, highly acclaimed scientists that disagree on the value and the importance of individual nutrient sources. And I feel bad because even as a scientist, I sometimes struggle to really wrap my head around just how important source A is versus source B versus source C, because the information that's available is sometimes conflicting. It's not always real transparent. And, I urge anglers and I urge environmental groups to all kind of come together and realize that it isn't about singling out the single worst source of nutrients. It's about dealing with all the nutrients to the best of your ability, and then finding a way to make that water flow as naturally as possible. You can't just single out one culprit, whether it's septic or sewage here in the East Coast, or whether it's sugarcane agriculture in the EAA. I mean, there's so many culprits that are all affecting the quality of Florida's waters, and I think you get sidetracked if you get too hung up on trying to pick your worst enemy. I mean, all these are huge problems, and I see a question here in the chat box I want to talk about. Are the problems in the northern IRL the same as the problems in the southern IRL, and are they caused by LACO discharges? And this is something I talk about all the time. People really want to blame one problem, for causing all these issues. And it's just not the case. We've got a really complicated story in Florida, and over the last 100 years, we've done a pretty good job of messing things up. But in the case of the northern Indian River Lagoon, there's really no link between what's happening up there and what's happening down here in Stewart, where the C-44 is dumping Lake O water into our estuary. So, the issues in the northern IRL are in some ways simpler to deal with because they're more local, but they're much more complicated because we really don't understand exactly what's happening up there. The Indian River Lagoon, the number that gets floated around a lot is it's lost like 50,000 acres of seagrass, but I've seen how they measure that, and like they could survey an area, and I swear if there's like one sprig of seagrass in an acre, they say that there's seagrass there. It's not a real genuine way of measuring seagrass. As an angler, I mean, I could see seagrass. When I see seagrass, it's there, and when I don't see seagrass, it's not there. And I don't always know what is being measured in areas where I know there's no seagrass, but I see a map that shows there's still some seagrass there. So practically speaking, the vast majority of the seagrass in the IRL is severely depleted, if not completely gone. And in the northern IRL, a lot of that has to do with nutrient inputs causing a different kind of algae bloom, not the toxic cyanobacteria that we see in our background picture here, but we get these blooms of something called Ario umbra. They call it brown tide, or a little brown algal organism. And it makes the water so chocolate milk brown, or kind of a soupy greenish brown color, that sunlight can't reach the bottom. And as a result, our grasses are dying. So then we get back to like chasing the nutrients. And right now in the northern IRL, there's this huge battle. Is it septic and sewage, or is it muck? Muck is that black mayonnaise stuff in the bottom of the estuary that's packed full of nitrogen and phosphorus. And, the way I look at it, muck is not a source of anything. Muck is just a stopping point. Muck takes nutrients from somewhere else, stores it for a little while, and then those nutrients get resolubilized back into the water. And I think for folks listening tonight that are up in the northern IRL, I mean, you really need to look at how we stop the inflow of nutrients into the estuary. And then secondarily, we do need to get rid of that muck at some point. But, to me, spending a ton of time and effort on muck removal without at least simultaneously working on preventing that muck from rebuilding is sort of like chasing your tail. Somebody commented about some things that are growing in the IRL that look an awful lot like seagrass. And I'll relate a story about a buddy of mine, Rick Warman's a guide up in the Banana River. And he called me a couple of years ago and said, "Zach, I've got the best news ever. There's turtle grass growing in the banana." And I said, "Well, that's interesting, because there never was turtle grass in the banana. It's not one of the seagrasses that you'd find in the Banana River." So, I was free. I went up the next day, and he took me out to his turtle grass flat, and my suspicions were confirmed. It was a type of macroalgae called Caulerpa. Looks just like seagrass, bright green, grows in big beds. The problem is it doesn't do all the good things that seagrass does. Seagrass has this real thick root system that anchors the bottom. Caulerpa is kind of sort of attached, but not really well. Doesn't seem like a whole lot of animals graze on Caulerpa. And it's a sign of nutrient pollution. It grows really well in places with lots of crap in the water. But I guess there is a plus side to it, in that these areas with Caulerpa are providing some shelter for fish and shellfish. They are anchoring the bottom a little bit. And I'm hopeful that in the areas where we've got these big Caulerpa beds, which are sort of a bad sign, we may eventually start to see some seagrass growing. Maybe the Caulerpa will facilitate the growth of seagrass at some point. But when you see algae in the water, I mean, whether it's microscopic algae like the brown tide or cyanobacteria or red tide, or macroalgae, the Caulerpa and the Gracilaria that drifts around, it's still a sign that there's too much bad stuff going in the water, and all of that is harmful for seagrass recovery. And so I'm a fish ecologist. I study game fish, but you can't study fish without studying the places that they live. So I spent a lot of time thinking about the habitats that these fish live in. So studying seagrass beds and oyster reefs and working in mangroves. And I mean, I can assure you that no amount of fisheries conservation work will ever make a difference if you don't provide a habitat for our fish to live in. I mean, you literally go straight up no kill, but if you don't have seagrass beds and oyster reefs and mangroves for juvenile game fish and their food to survive in, you're not going to have a fishery. And that's sort of what we're seeing right now in the IRL. We've got cleaner water. We can see things for the first time, but we're not seeing a whole lot of life. I've spent days where I had some good sight fishing, but even with the clean water we've had in the last, let's say, 4 or 5 months, this winter and spring, I've had days where we pulled 3 or 4 miles and had just a couple of shots and saw a couple of blades of seagrass. So yeah, the clean water is a good thing, but boy, we really need to start doing more to get the seagrass and the oysters and the mangroves towards the track for recovery.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We've talked with Aaron Adams at BTT at length before about, fish hatcheries or restocking programs. If you don't have the habitat to support the fish, you're kind of putting the cart before the horse. So that's a good point. And also just the nutrient issue. I mean, it's not one thing for everywhere. Different areas are having, different inputs are the majority. I do think it's important to look at where we can take the biggest bites out of this stuff. And the biggest bites for Mosquito Lagoon and Indian River are not going to be the same as the biggest bites for Okeechobee or the Caloosahatchee. So it is important, but that's a little more of a regional aspect. Certainly the majority of the nutrients coming into Lake Okeechobee are primarily industrial agriculture. That's simply because the majority of the land use north of Okeechobee is industrial agriculture. It's not that agriculture is bad. It's just that's not the case at all. It's actually just the fact that that's the dominant land use. So we have to look at how can that industry and those land uses there modify and adapt their practices to lessen the impact on the watershed below. And then, for Mosquito Lagoon and Indian River, it's a totally different thing. We have to look at what can be done there to reduce the lion's share of the nutrients going into those waters. So I do think it's important. You can't blame one thing for all problems statewide, but we do have to look at, case by case, where's the lion's share of progress able to be made and address those, go for those big ones as much as we can.
Exactly. Yeah. It's all about ROI with that, with any of this stuff. And, if you look at, I think you brought it up, Chris, like the nutrient pollution coming into Lake O, you got 75-80% of, the nutrients coming into Lake Okeechobee are coming from agriculture. And we know that the lake is getting about, 5 times more nutrient load than it can handle. But having said that, if agriculture were to be gone up there, it would, make way for, like if we were just going to, put all the farms out of business, they're going to, go up for sale, and you're going to end up with golf courses or whatever up there. So it's about coming up with solutions to this that work for everybody, because you don't want to replace something that's a problem with another problem. You want to replace it with a solution. And, what that looks like, I don't really know, but, I'm sure there's some things that can be done, whether it's buffer zones or how water's used or putting MTAs, best management practices or doing a better job with them. Because what we know is what we're doing right now is absolutely not working, and it's getting worse. So it's a matter of, figuring out, what that return on investment is. And, the what happened this past year and really the history of that is, it gets heavily politicized in Tallahassee. And, like you said, Zach, like it's not about one source. And, there was some legislation put forward to, stop, it was supposed to help with algae blooms on Lake Okeechobee, and it largely ignored the dominant pollution source, coming into it. So it's like, well, if you look at it from that approach, we're never going to get to where we need to be. Because, as long as you're looking at it from, it's like there's, a huge amount of focus gets put on this, it's all septic tanks, it's all, sewage, it's all whatever. It's like, well, yeah, we need to improve all that. But we have to look at this holistically, because as soon as you get like, tunnel vision on it, then it doesn't get us to, that end result that we're all looking for. And that's really where it becomes convoluted. It's the political side of it.
And it is critical for us to look at ways to, give tools to whatever the major input is in a given area, to look at solutions for those, not to try to just outright change them. Like you said, Daniel, we don't want to see, farms replaced by development and pavement and neighborhoods. That's the last thing we want to see. But we also can't keep going down the path that we're on. So we need to see is how do we keep our farmland active and meanwhile reduce the amount of nutrients that are coming off those lands and into our watersheds. I think that we can do that. I mean, we can put man on the moon. We can look at better delivery techniques, more precise techniques. We can look at buffer zones. We can look at better oversight, when it comes to that. And then when you talk about septic tanks and stuff like that on Indian River and Mosquito Lagoon, we can look at how those problems need to be addressed. You go to other parts of the state like Fort Lauderdale, Miami, that's an infrastructure problem. I mean, that's all sewer. You're talking about sewer that can't keep up in that infrastructure. So those need to be addressed differently. So each place needs to look at what the biggest contributors are there, and then how we can address that. Sewer infrastructure in Miami, we can't have, millions of people leave Miami. So that's not the answer. Just like having ag leave, north of the lake isn't the answer. It's getting the infrastructure brought up to handle the load of people that are down there. And then, in agriculture's case, it's getting best management practices in place and buffer zones and different application processes or products that are being used that are going to help with that. So I think that's all really important to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you guys have done just so well is made people throughout Florida aware of all the issues that aren't knocking immediately on their door. People been pretty regionally savvy about what's happening to their waterways, and in just the last couple of years, Captains for Clean Water has made anglers throughout the state and boaters and homeowners and water users in general much more aware of the suite of problems that are impacting all of our estuaries. And I want my neighborhood to care about what's happening in the Caloosahatchee and Florida Bay just as much as I want you guys to care about the Indian River and the St. Lucie and Florida Bay. And we're seeing more of that now. I know for a long time, the people in the Northern IRL just could care less about what's happening down here in Stuart and the LACO discharges. And in the last couple of years, I've seen a better understanding from people who fish and work on the IRL that yeah, these are different problems, but it's one system. I mean, the Indian River Lagoon is the Indian River Lagoon. It's 156 miles long, but it's one body of water. So, whether you live up in Brevard County and you're dealing with sewage and septic as a primary concern, or you're living down here in Martin, St. Lucie County, where you really are at the epicenter of LACO discharges, it's still one water body. And we look at migratory fish. I mean, these fish are moving throughout that water body. And so, the redfish that I catch here may spend time in the Northern IRL. Certainly the tarpon do. And we've got bait fish. Without forage fish, we don't have fisheries. And so many of our forage fish migrate seasonally. So you can't just care about your community in isolation. You have to really develop a better understanding for the issues that are affecting all of our interconnected water bodies. And that, that comes into play when you get your voice heard. You can't just speak up about your local issues. You can't just make phone calls and write letters about the issues affecting your immediate area. I think it's a kind of a revolution that we've seen in the last couple of years where people throughout Florida are speaking up about Florida issues, not just backyard issues.
That's a good point.
Definitely. And it comes a reminder, Zach, when you said about the forage fish, something just popped in my head. I remember as a kid, and Chris, I'm sure you remember this as well. When I was a kid fishing around, the mouth of the Caloosahatchee River and all this, I remember multiple times being out there, with my uncles, and there were, we're in a bunch of snook on whatever shoreline, and they wouldn't bite because there was so much bait around, so many glass minnows all down the shoreline. And I cannot think of one time that ever happened to me when I was charter fishing. Other than, out on the beach certain times of year when you get big groups of bait in. But I would remember frequently, and we were fly fishing, we weren't live bait fishing, but as a kid, multiple times. Like it would be pretty regular occurrence. Like you'd get somewhere and be like, snook all over the place. They chase your fly, they look at it, but it's just like, there's so much bait. Why are they going to eat my fly? Like they got a lot to choose from. And now, I mean, fishing those same areas. I mean, if you see a little tiny group of glass minnows, you're like, whoa, what's that? You never see that there anymore. So it's just one of those like longer term.
And on the aspect of, statewide, using your voice to push for solutions statewide, and using your voice to push for action or solutions regionally in your backyard. People also need to not underestimate the weight and importance of their voice in their backyard. Because if you have issues that are going to be addressed and have to be addressed by the county level or city level, those people are going to listen to the people that are within those zip codes. It doesn't do any good for, someone from the East Coast to come over to Lee County and demand that the county commissioners do something or don't do something when that's not who they're there to represent. So making sure that but it does on a state level issue where the decisions are made by the state or the federal government. So it's important to see the importance of your voice in your backyard as well on some of these issues where, when you see things that need to be addressed and changed and it's at a county level or city level, making your voice heard there, sending those emails, attending county commissioner meetings, rallying your neighbors and your friends and your coworkers to engage on those issues is every bit as important as supporting national initiatives or statewide initiatives as well.
I think just our election cycle tells us a lot about how our voices get heard. Even as recently as like 2016, big election year, really bad environmental year. And we didn't really hear a lot on TV from candidates about how they were going to help the environment. It just wasn't a talking point. There were so many other big issues. We did not hear that dialogue. And you fast forward just 2 years to the 2018 midterm elections, and in that little window, the voices of Floridians got really loud. And even though they were individual voices, they added up to the point that, if you guys think back to the 2018 election lead-in, when people were every day bombarded with television ads and press conferences and, politicians going on news talk shows, every single candidate from county commissioners all the way up to congressmen and women, every single candidate had something to say about what they were going to do to help Florida's environment. And I attribute that 100% to small voices. For a very long time, our elected officials really cared more about their donors and special interest groups and lobbyists. And I think for the very first time in the 2018 election, we started to see some politicians listening to constituents with respect to Florida's waters. And I really hope that that's a sign of good things to come, not just a blip on the radar. And that's one of the main reasons why I just keep telling people to keep your foot on the gas. This just because we have some clean water right now is not a reason to stop caring and stop fighting. We need to make sure that, our next round of elections, even more candidates are talking about it, and not just talking about it, are becoming more savvy about it. It's one thing to talk about the environment to get votes. It's another to really demonstrate an actual knowledge and maybe more specifically, a personal connection to the environment. I oftentimes say I don't care why politicians are doing what they're doing as long as they're doing what their constituents ask of them. But in reality, I'd much rather have an elected official who has a personal connection to the water than somebody who's just doing the right thing for the sake of their voters. Either way, though, this political movement that we've seen in the last 2 years or so is really pivotal in terms of why we're seeing some improvements in the health of our waters and why we're seeing movement forward with some of these restoration projects.
That's a good point. And on the heels of that point, not only is it critical for people to use their voice to drive action, and like we saw with just the attention that water quality had in 2018, but after those people get in office, we have to hold them accountable. If and then and then we assume that they're going to do the right thing, we're being naive. And so it's very critical, just as critical as it is to use your voice during an election year. It's every bit as critical to use your voice in between those years to hold their feet to the fire and demand that they do everything within their power to see change. We got some more questions here. Somebody, LJ, you guys need to stop touching your face. There's a pandemic. Jeez, well, yeah, LJ, no worries, buddy. I'm in my living room. I've got my alcohol and my thing. I wipe down my computer keypad, my phone, wipe our hands down, wipe my face down all the time. So we're good to go here, man. We've never been so clean. Let's see here. Troy Brown, yeah, you're right. If people who get into office don't do what they promised or what they should, they absolutely need to be called out in the next cycle. We demand that not only they gotta not only talk the talk, they gotta walk the walk. We're not stupid, you know. I don't know where Captain Dan went. It looks like his interweb might have be underperforming. We got him back.
Oh, hey. So, all right, y'all missed out on some good stuff. So we're going to go on a field trip here. Hold on.
Oh, yes.
You missed out on almost a dog fight, and you missed out on my dog almost catching a kitten. So I found a group of kittens out here in the yard. That's why I kind of disappeared a few times. I almost just got my ass kicked by a mama cat too. She's not real happy about me snooping around.
So Zach, just so you know, these happy hours with a scientist it's basically everything the scientists can do to keep us on track. It's kind of like what do you call it? Like the crocodile hunter, goes on walkabouts and beer reviews and cocktail voting, all mixed in with science. So don't worry, this is pretty standard for our deal here. Daniel's on.
Yeah. All right, I gotta flip my computer upside down. So you're gonna see hopefully some upside down kittens, and I'm probably also gonna get Mama Cat she was hissing and trying to come at me here. So let me know if you can see under here.
You can only hope.
Can you see him down there?
It looks like I see some eyes. No, move it up a little bit.
It's hard. Let me. I might even be able to. No, that's me. Oh yeah, there's 3 of them, 3 little kittens. So I'm gonna try this little angle here.
Looks like you're the proud new papa.
Oh man, how do you guys feel about cats? They're one of the worst invasive species on our planet. I know I'm not popular for saying that.
You see him down there?
Yes. Oh yeah. We can see them. Upside down bat kittens. No doubt.
So yeah, my dog Bentley, who you all know. Oh yeah, I hate cats. These things are pretty damn cute though.
I'll say this: I've never had a dog get up on my boat and shred my sea deck.
Yeah. No, I absolutely hate cats, and I think one of my neighbors released like 60 or 70 of these things a couple of years ago. That was a rumor that was going around because we're overrun with them, and as you can see, they're taking over. I mean, it's like the 3rd litter. Not all of them have been so fortunate. A lot of them have been killed by dogs, but
where do you even get 60 cats to release in the first place? Is there like a black market or something you're missing out on?
I think they're breeding in his house. I don't know. I'm not. That's a long story. I mean, we could get into it now, but he's got all kinds of dogs and cats and all kinds of stuff. I'm not really sure what goes on over there. I don't ask.
All right, it's time for a viewer's choice. We need to Representative Fitzenhagen suggested we do a toast for construction beginning on the EAA Reservoir project. I think that's a great idea. So it's time for viewer's choice. And we're going to decide what I'm going to go with tonight. So we're going both with Papa's Pilar, our friends at Papa's. big supporters of captains. So we've got the dark or the blonde. The dark is an 86 proof, very, very kind of full body, really, really tasty rum. The blonde is a heater, 92 proof. Typically, I'm kind of more of a dark guy, but we're gonna let the viewers decide tonight. Which one am I going with? Once we get an overwhelming majority here, we're gonna make ourselves a cocktail.
So while we're waiting for a vote, Chris, you mentioned something important earlier, that kind of shifting baseline concept, the idea that the way you saw it the first time is the way it should be. And I've been reading some really cool books that I think everybody would appreciate. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see these or not. This one is called Camping and Cruising in Florida. And it's a killer book. And then this one is Camp Life in Florida. So Camp Life in Florida and Camping and Cruising in Florida. So check it out. These were both written in the 1870s by people that were traveling through Florida and hunting and fishing their way through the state.
Wow.
And they tell the stories of what our waterways actually used to look like. So, you're reading these books and it's cool because, one of the things that hasn't changed in 150 years is the map. So, they're sailing into Sebastian River or Crane Creek or Turkey Creek, all these places that I fish. And they're describing, like, I can literally picture the bluffs and the shorelines that they're talking about, except it's completely desolate, it's unpopulated, or there's some crazy fisherman with a shack and a banana tree. And, the real interesting part for me is the amount of fish that they catch. I mean, just an unbelievable amount of silk and redfish and tarpon and sharks, and the amount of oysters, bushels and bushels of oysters. They're grilling oysters every night for dinner while they're camping. In both of those books, the author made a journey to Lake Okeechobee, and in both cases, they got lost and they couldn't get through the 12-mile wide cypress belt on the east side of the lake. And then they described the lake and the marshes around the lake. And in one of the chapters, they could see the lake, but just couldn't get through to it.
They talk about that. And they talk about the amount of waterfowl and migratory birds and stuff that they would see. Those old stories like that, man, are really good tools to put into perspective the change that has happened in a short amount of time. We're not talking about thousands of years. We're talking about a few decades. All right, so this is one of the closer bouts for what to drink that I think we've seen. Let me see here. We got one.
Oh, you're actually tied.
Yeah, we have a tie. All right, the next suggestion is what's going to be the tiebreaker. A lot of these people, Troy and Don, I think you just want me to drink the heater. It's Thursday, guys. Come on. Let's see. There's a little bit of a lag from when we request to when we.
You said the next vote is what it is.
The decision's been made by Reed McKinstry, who also happens to be the chairman of our board of directors. So, Reed, you got it, buddy. It's the dark. I'm gonna do dark on the rocks with a little bit of lime juice, as Captain Al Keller suggested. All right, lime juice. There we go. All right, thanks for the suggestions, guys. What, did we lose Captain Dan again?
I think he's playing with his cats.
He's secretly a cat lover. Don't let him fool you.
Hey, while we're waiting for him to come back, I had a video I wanted to share with you guys. I don't know if we can pull that video up. We talk a lot about nutrients and algae blooms, and I think each and every one of us has been around some sort of algae bloom, whether it's red tide or blue-green algae or brown tide. But check this out. I caught this snook last summer. I don't know if you guys can make that out, but there's actually a giant clump of algae growing on the snook. So when you think about the nutrient problems that our waterways are having, what is more telling than catching a fish that literally has algae growing on it? It probably had some sort of injury to its gill cover that exposed bone. And our waterways are just so nutrient rich right now that like literally the animal sprouted algae on its body. And,
that's crazy.
I mean, there's no real canary in the coal mine for the Indian River Lagoon and the St. Lucie and the Caloosahatchee and Florida Bay that we can, stamp that title to. But boy, when you see a snook with algae growing on it, it's pretty scary.
Yeah, I would say so. That almost looks like we have an algae here in Charlotte Harbor that gets really bad. It's been bad for the past 8 months or so. It's like I think it's called filamentous algae. And it looks like that real stringy hair-like algae, and it's
almost it's filamentous, isn't it, Chris? I wonder how it got the name.
They should call it like something like that, actually.
Yeah,
I think the
scientific,
they should.
Yeah, I think we're onto something. It's I think the true scientific name is like angel hair pasta algae, but if you guys want to call it filamentous or whatever, that's fine.
I think that's probably wise. All right, Captain Dan's back.
We got to pick another beer. So I did a Heady Topper. This is not something that's readily available. It's from the Alchemist in Vermont. It's one of the most sought after craft beers around. So we've got Sweetwater 420 Mango Kush Wheat Ale or Cigar City Tocobaga Red India Pale Ale.
See, this is a first, Zach, that we've had a double viewers choice in one night.
I'm impressed.
It is, yeah. We're also going to pick what Zach eats for dinner.
We've actually been eating pretty well. A local seafood wholesaler here in Fort Pierce has lost most of their wholesale business, so they've actually opened up retail right on the dockside, and they're selling giant chunks of yellowfin tuna, and they had bluefin tuna the other day, and wahoo and dolphin, real cheap. So, and it's all outdoors, social distancing. You roll up, you pay some cash, and they give you a giant wad of whatever you order. So it's a pretty cool service back to our community, and it's keeping the commercial fishermen employed and keeping us eating well.
That's good. Gosh, looks like
we're 3 in a row. Yeah, we're doing the Sweetwater. Yeah. This was not an option. I already hammered this one. This one's Gonzo. So we can't drink the same beer twice in a row on this. That's part of the rules and regulations in our bylaws. So we're going with Sweetwater.
Yep. All right, guys, and everybody joining us on the virtual happy hour.
Yeah.
Like to
cheers.
Cheers to construction of the EAA Reservoir project, the STA portion of that beginning today, and to all of your hard work, all of you using your voices, your action, your outreach, everything that everybody's done to get us to where we are today. Cheers to all your efforts.
Cheers.
Thanks for the support. Cheers.
Oh, you're not supposed to, that's bad luck.
Oh, yeah.
You weren't planning on drinking that second one, were you?
Oh, no, I'm definitely drinking it.
No, I mean, I want to echo that. We would not be where we are right now if it weren't for all of your voices and your effort and your concern. And a big part of that is getting more educated about the problem. Whether it's listening into an informal chat like this tonight or listening into more of a science-based webinar, the more informed all of you are, the more you're going to be able to communicate your knowledge, whether it's to an elected official or a neighbor or a friend. And the more educated voices we have talking about these issues, the more likely we are to see some sort of fix in the future. And that EAA reservoir STA is a big deal. The STA is the filter component of the reservoir. We have lots of ways you can filter small volumes of water, but there's really no mechanical way to filter the amount of water coming out of Lake Okeechobee that we need to send into the Glades. So, really the only feasible way of doing it is not through some quack science or, nanotechnology or something you sprinkle on the water. And I'm not joking. I literally get phone calls once a week about somebody who wants to sprinkle something on Lake Okeechobee. The solution is to build these wetlands. And I think it's important to remind everybody that area south of Lake Okeechobee used to be a solid sawgrass prairie. It was flooded underwater. It was the river of grass. To see that today, you have to get south of Tamiami Trail into Everglades National Park. But that swath of sawgrass ran right up to the south edge of Lake Okeechobee. So the idea of putting filtration marshes in an area that's already meant to be wetland is not a real crazy concept. And the plants in those marshes are able to pull nitrogen and phosphorus out of the water. And I think it's interesting. I'm not an engineer, I'm a biologist, but I have a little bit of an understanding of how these wetlands work. It's not just one big wetland. They're actually cells within the wetland, and those cells have different types of vegetation growing in them. And water managers are able to move water from one cell to the next, and each cell accomplishes something different. So this is really, almost like my saltwater fish tank behind me. It's like a multi-stage filtration apparatus, except on an enormous scale. And the idea of just storing water in the EAA, that's not a real appealing concept. You really need to have the ability to store, but also clean that water. So this STA that was started today, that we are finally seeing some forward movement on, that's the filter for these efforts to move water back south into the Everglades and Florida Bay.
Yep, you're absolutely right. And that's a great analogy. Somebody was just asking me about that, actually, just about how those things were laid out and how they worked. And that's basically what I explained was, it has these different cells and they progress the water through those cells. And when it comes out the other end, it's substantially cleaner than when it went in. And I think also just, touching on the fact of everybody's efforts collectively making a difference to drive progress, that effort is going to be different at different times. There's times when things are happening and it's kind of we're just keeping our eye on the pulse of what's going on, when the action that needs to be taken by the public is to educate themselves and educate their friends and neighbors and people within their circle, and to not let those people get complacent. And then there's times when, there's problems on the horizon and we need to kick in the doors and take action. And so those are equally as important, and there's not always these physical actionable items that need to take place, but often the education aspect is every bit as important. But when there is a time for action needed, and we do have to, to start screaming and kicking and demand that we see something happen, those times are critical to have everybody teed up, to have everybody on board. And that's where the education and understanding that came beforehand is really key.
Yeah, definitely so. It's all about, organizations, that are effective. They only ask their members and their supporters to do stuff like when it's really needed. And we really believe that at Captains. Let's not, make a crisis out of anything. We got enough problems that we're dealing with. Let's really, save up to where when something's a big problem, we got to get everybody on it. And that's I think the key to success. And yeah. I want to give some shout outs here. Some people that are tuning in. Reed McKinstry is our chairman of our board at Captains for Clean Water. Hey, Reed, he voted for the darkroom, so I think you crossed him on that one. Kimberly Mitchell is on here. She is the executive director of the Everglades Trust. She's a gangster. They do a lot more political stuff. They're a 501c4, so they don't have the IRS telling them what they can and can't do as much. So there's a lot of politics involved with that. We stay more on the education awareness side of it, but give the Everglades Trust a follow on Facebook and see what they're up to for all the stuff that we're not really allowed to do. Christopher Holt, definitely another badass on here. He's one of the folks out there leading the efforts on the awareness and education and trying to get change on Lake Okeechobee and just our water management. our aquatic plant management and our freshwater bodies. Chris and Brandon Medlock and that whole crowd. They've been real champions on that. So thanks for tuning in here. Samantha Warner, who the hell is that? So yeah, can she make she actually had a request for a cameo from Sam a couple times on here.
And
that's my better half.
Chris Holt, he said Okeechobee used to be one of those giant filters before the spraying. That's something that that we've brought up talking about the spraying issue, and we're going to have one of these live videos solely dedicated to aquatic plant management and the spraying topic. But
probably a couple of them. I think we'll do a few.
Can I talk about it? Can I talk about it just a little bit?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But that's one of the things that I've tried to emphasize when talking with our policymakers or with different agencies and FWC is that we need to look at how these plants are being managed for a number of different reasons and an entirely new end goal. We need to look at how we can utilize plants, whether they're native or non-native, to improve water quality and also provide habitat. What we've seen is going in and eliminating vegetation in a massive area because it's non-native actually can be more detrimental than the non-native vegetation itself in the first place. We need to look at what the balance is there. We can't have areas get choked out, but I think there's real opportunity that we have observed as fishermen and hunters who spend thousands of hours in those areas to see that some of that vegetation could actually play a vital role, not only in providing habitat, but also for nutrient uptake, improving water quality, and then looking at how we can manage that vegetation with methods that will remove it from the cycle, thus removing the nutrients that are taken up and sequestered within those plants. I think just rewriting a new end goal and a new target of what we're trying to get out of plant management is the first big step that needs to be done to see real meaningful progress there. So Zach, give us a little kind of rundown from your point of view.
Yeah, so I mean, Christopher hit the nail on the head. We talked about the STAs acting as man-made filters. I mean, Lake Okeechobee and the marshes around the lake used to be the filters. And you read these old books like I'm going through now, and the lake itself, I mean, it was a living, breathing entity. During wet years, it would nearly double in size. It would just be all marsh around the edges. It would get huge. During dry years, it was okay for the lake to dry down. I mean, the Everglades is built around wet years and dry years. When you look at herbicide spraying on waterways in Florida, and not just Lake Okeechobee, but any of our waterways, from the lake to major canals to just backyard ponds, to me, it's a triple whammy. Number one, the point brings up, you are killing the filter. These plants take nitrogen and phosphorus out of the water, and they grow using those nutrients. When you kill the plants, you're physically killing part of the filter. And then the second issue is when you kill those plants and they die and sink to the bottom, all the nutrients in their tissue get released right back into the water. But they don't just magically vanish. So when you have a lake that's been sprayed, all that stuff sinks to the bottom, it starts to rot, and boom, those nutrients are right back in the water. That's one of the reasons why, even though it seems like a small issue, we really advocate for people not to throw their grass clippings in the water. Your grass loves nitrogen. You cut your grass, you throw it in the water, all the nitrogen in that grass gets released right back into the water. The same thing's happening when we spray. And then the one that you don't hear about quite as much is the fact that glyphosate, Roundup, the chemical that they're using for a lot of this aquatic spraying, actually has molecules of phosphorus bound into the chemical itself. So you're literally using a chemical that, as it breaks down, releases more nutrients into the water. The real tricky side of this is nobody fully understands the long-term consequences of very, very small quantities of glyphosate in our waters. There's research out there looking at how long it lasts on a field, how long it takes for UV light to break it down. There are some studies looking at how long it sticks around in the water, but here's what's missing. We don't know how toxic tiny concentrations of glyphosate are for things like seagrass or larval fish or even humans further up the food chain. We're seeing the same problem, obviously, with blue-green algae. We've got a pretty good handle on microcystins in microcystis, but nobody really understands BMAA, this other amino acid that's found in blue-green algae blooms. We know it's out there, but we don't really understand what the numbers mean, and what those will eventually do to our bodies. And I think the same thing applies to something like glyphosate, where even if we can measure it, we really don't understand how those micromolar concentrations might be affecting seagrass. And I look at the Indian River Lagoon, for example. It's pretty easy to argue that the northern Indian River Lagoon, Mosquito Lagoon, Banana River have lost seagrass beds because of those brown tide algae blooms we talked about earlier. We're literally shading the seagrass. It's like throwing a tent in your backyard and leaving it up too long, or a piece of plywood in your grass, and you get that yellow patch of grass. We're seeing the same thing in the northern IRL. In the southern IRL, where the St. Lucie dumps in, it's pretty easy to argue that our seagrass losses are heavily tied to salinity. We're dumping fresh water into a place that's meant to be salty. How do you explain the massive seagrass loss in the middle Indian River Lagoon? We've got areas here in Fort Pierce where I live, and then Vero and into the southern part of Brevard County, where we don't have huge amounts of agricultural runoff. We don't have any LACO discharge at all. We don't have a lot of algae growth. And even right inside of inlets, like Sebastian Inlet is a huge inlet with big turnover every day. Even during an algae bloom, you get clean water coming in and out of the inlet. We've got no grass. So it very well may be that there's some other culprit causing seagrass to die. It might not be glyphosate. It might be a virus or some sort of disease process. But boy, it certainly calls out the need for more research to figure out how these chemicals that are being dumped into our water willy-nilly are affecting the habitats as well as the actual animals themselves.
And not only that, but the prolonged exposure. What does that do? And also, what does it do on a microscopic level or a bacterial level? What does it do? I talk to Flip Pallet a lot. He's a buddy of mine, and he talks about how he's seen this just drastic decline as the spraying program has gone on for years now in the amount of turtles. And so what does it do to, the bacteria and stuff that live in those turtles' gut, or what does it do to weaken their immune system to make them susceptible to viruses or other outside things? So there's a lot of variables that could come off of something that's not a direct point source. This killed the fish directly, or this killed the turtle directly, but as a result of that chain effect, it ultimately is their demise.
I hear an awful lot of people that say, it's harmless. It's been proven to be harmless. It's non-toxic. I look at it this way. Every human toxin that I can think of off the top of my head that have become an environmental issue, at one point, they weren't an environmental issue. Mercury at one point was not a bad thing. Lead at one point was not a bad thing. PCBs, DDT, these are all things that were great at one point until we realized they weren't great anymore. So to sit back and say that glyphosate's not a problem, it may just be the next DDT, and we're not on top of it yet.
Yeah, it's never a problem the first time you use it. I think we'd be ignorant to say that it's not a problem for the next generation or even our own generation.
There's studies coming out now where they're finding traces of glyphosate in, like wheat products, like crackers and cereal, that, it's way down the line. Those things are hyper processed, but there's still traces of it to where it's in like almost 90% of the wheat products that you buy. And so you think about, that it's not going to kill you to eat a bowl of Cheerios, but what happens if you're eating that with those trace elements of that ever since you were 2 years old until you're, in your 60s? Exactly.
It's scary. And totally different chemical, but that's what scares me about the cyanobacteria blooms we're dealing with right now. Man, I've got a lot of friends that are molecular ecologists, chemical toxicologists, and I think a lot of people are hesitant to say that BMAA is definitely a neurotoxin and it's definitely linked to Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and ALS. But when you start pressing people, it's not that it's not an issue. It's that, well, the studies aren't conclusive, or the tests aren't accurate enough, or we don't know for sure yet. I don't know about you guys. I'm not willing to roll the dice and take that risk. I mean, there's a decent amount of evidence growing now to support the fact that exposure to chemicals produced during blooms of cyanobacteria, particularly BMAA, may have a long-lasting impact on us. But right now, other than the testing that the Florida DEP does during a bloom, like right when the green stuff's out there, there's really not a whole lot of follow-up. When the blooms go away, nobody's coming back out to resample the water. Nobody's sampling the mud and the muck and the sediment and the crabs and the shrimp and the snook, other than researchers at laboratories that are, you know, privately funding this work. The state of Florida and the federal government aren't going out and telling us that our fish are safe to eat. And I get in the habit of going out on the beach and catching some mackerel for dinner or some pompano. And then I remember that all the fish that those fish feed on, the anchovies and the pilchards, are spending time in the estuary. And it may be that, you know, the fish on my beach have been feeding on things that are full of toxins from their time in the estuary, even though the fish I'm catching aren't fish that spend a whole lot of time in the polluted waters. We're learning that a lot of human diseases, even if they're genetic, have some sort of environmental trigger or an environmental component. And it's starting to look like, you know, the issue of BMAA getting into the brain and causing proteins to misfold may exacerbate conditions that you are already genetically predisposed to, but maybe you would never have had if you were able to avoid being exposed to this toxic crap.
That's a really good point. And it just comes back to making smart, common sense decisions now that aren't likely to lead to repercussions for the next generation or generations to come. And looking at how solutions that we strive for are those that are natural, like using plants to take up nutrients instead of putting a chemical in the water that could supposedly dissolve this nutrient or that nutrient or something else. And, you know, there's just the reasons as far as like the spraying stuff, you know, you hit it, man. I mean, you kill these plants. Not only does it release nutrients back into the lakes and rivers, but it does it in a flash, in a big spike of nutrient. It's not a slow shedding of leaves and decomposing of leaves as they're shed. It's an all-out flash of nutrient that happens when those plants are sprayed and decomposed. That stuff, as you said, settles, becomes muck on the bottom. That muck has an effect on the native vegetation in multiple ways. One, if there's, you know, eelgrass and shrimp grass and stuff like that that's on the bottom, and that muck blows around and drifts around and settles on top of that, it kills it. It's like if you were to cut your lawn when it's really long and leave the grass clippings laying on the lawn. The stuff that's under it is going to die. The other is that muck is then there, so when we get windy conditions or storms and those waters get stirred up and become turbid, they block out the light and inhibit photosynthesis from happening, and that can kill that vegetation, as does, you know, holding the lake artificially high. You know, we're talking with some biologists, and when there were some big areas of eelgrass that had died off, and we were asking, you know, why did you guys spray this stuff? And they said that those areas weren't being sprayed. That was a result of the lake being so high that there was not able to have photosynthesis take place, and those grass beds died as a result of that. So it's a lot of different factors. We have to use common sense, bring balance back into these systems. You know, we always say bring down the peaks and bring up the valleys, bring back a balance, and use common sense on how we're managing these water bodies and how we're looking at proposed solutions, and not looking at Band-Aids to symptoms, but looking at real solutions to the root problems.
You know, you talk about the depth of the lake. I mean, it's my opinion that a high lake is far more harmful than a low lake. You know, we're hearing a lot of conversation right now about lake levels and concerns about going into the summer. And if we don't get enough rain in the near future, we might run into issues with Florida Bay. Here's the thing. Keeping the lake low is not necessarily a bad thing. The problem is all of the available water that's coming out of the lake is not going to Florida Bay. It's not going to the Everglades. It's going to sustain agriculture in the EAA. So to say that a low lake is bad for the environment, you're missing one key point. A low lake is bad for the environment, and it's bad for water supplies, and it's bad for the aquifer, because there's this giant roadblock in the way. And I would argue that in a natural state, a low lake is not necessarily a real bad thing. Right. It's good for the marshes in the lake. It's good for the fish in the lake. Yeah, it makes for tough boating. It certainly makes it harder to navigate. But, you know, as anybody who fishes the flats knows, we're always fishing in shallow water. We're always able to tough navigation. Sorry, I mean, you trim up and slow down and be more careful.
Well, yeah, and also it's not a constant low thing. It's got these times, but you hit the nail on the head. I mean, there are some times when in the recent history, you know, just within the last few weeks, where the Caloosahatchee was not getting the amount of water it needed during dry times. The Everglades was not getting and still is not getting the amount of water that is needed in dry times. Yet there was thousands of cubic feet per second coming out of the lake to sugarcane farms in the EAA. And the point is they were getting priority over the natural systems. And meanwhile, they were also complaining about the lake being low. Well, if you're complaining about the lake being low, and look at where the biggest user, the biggest amount of water was coming out of the lake at that point in time, it was hands down going to the sugarcane farms. And that's the problem. You know, a private industry should not get precedence over the public or the natural ecosystem, period.
I want to try to paint a picture. Imagine that water that Chris talks about coming out of the lake and into the EAA right now during a drought period. Take that water, clean it to the point that it's perfectly healthy for the Everglades, and send that identical volume of water south into the glades. What would it look like? What would it feel like? You know, how would that react to the sawgrass prairies and the mangrove ecotone in Florida Bay? It's got to be spotlessly clean. I'm pie in the sky dreaming here, but you've got the water available to irrigate an agricultural area. If you had the ability to take that same amount of water and use it for the health of the ecosystem and to provide safe water supply south of the lake and recharge aquifers, we'd be in a very, very different place right now.
Yeah. I think our ecosystems should get precedence. There's no definition, no doubt about that. I mean, you know, it should be tiered. Once the Everglades is getting the water that it needs, and once the people are getting the water that they need to drink and live off of, then private industry falls in line there. You know, there's no guarantees for the rest of us. There's no guarantees that, you know, realtors are going to get to sell the amount of properties that they need to. There's no guarantees that restaurants are going to be able to, you know, do anything. Their special interests shouldn't get a guaranteed supply over and above that of the natural resources and of the public. That's public's water. It's the public's water. It's our water.
Yeah, I think definitely so.
I think most years you can achieve both. I mean, it's not about completely eliminating agriculture in Florida. It's never going to happen. We need food to live. I mean, you know, even if you're a vegetarian, you still have to eat stuff, right? So I think the idea here is how can we find a way to build a compromise, both from management at the federal level and cooperation at the state and local level, to create as sustainable of an agricultural industry as possible, both north of the lake from a pollution perspective and south of the lake from an obstacle perspective. Yeah, the sugar industry is cleaner than it's ever been before, but a big part of that is because of those STAs that we built to clean agricultural runoff.
Yeah,
we've got this
taxpayer dollars mostly.
With taxpayer dollars. Yeah, so I mean, I think it's a matter of finding a way to continue agriculture in Florida, but doing it in a way that doesn't put the environment dead last. And you know, the lawsuits shouldn't be about protecting water for agriculture. The lawsuits need to be about protecting water for the environment. And you know, it's frustrating when we see how a very small management change, like we saw last spring, where we got some early discharges to lower the lake level, and the end result was no harmful discharges during the summer.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, that is the ultimate. That's not a 10-year project. That is an instantaneous environmental fix, and it worked. And I think I want to just real quick. I know I've got some East Coast people watching tonight. It's probably pretty common knowledge over in your area, but the Caloosahatchee needs a certain amount of fresh water. The St. Lucie does not. The St. Lucie River was a coastal river. It didn't go very far west in Martin and St. Lucie counties. There was a sand ridge about where I-95 runs, and the vast majority of the runoff historically for the St. Lucie River was coastal. Caloosahatchee is different. So when we talk about no discharges, on my side of the state, I want 0 CFS coming out of Lake Okeechobee. On your side of the state, you need dry season discharges, but because that water is going into the agricultural area, Caloosahatchee and Florida Bay are both suffering from high salinities. I saw Benny commented earlier that Florida Bay's been, for weeks now, saltier than the ocean, and that's where we start to see problems with seagrass die-offs. Dr. Steve told you guys all about it a couple weeks ago. I'll reiterate for anybody that's not watching, Florida Bay needs fresh water. It needs clean water. And when Florida Bay gets too salty, the seagrasses die, and it leads to this vicious cycle of murky water and hydrogen sulfide in the water and fish kills. And it's really slow to recover. So that's why it's so important. I talked about it earlier. It's not just about cleaning the water. It's about getting that clean water in the right places at the right time.
Yeah. And the fact of the matter is, it's not the state's responsibility or the public's responsibility to guarantee water supply to a private entity. We're not saying that agriculture shouldn't exist. We absolutely need it. But you know what? It's not our job at the environment's expense and at the public's expense to guarantee the water supply. I have a real easy solution. If I was growing hundreds of thousands of acres of sugarcane in the EAA, and I was concerned about my water supply, I would simply turn a percentage of my land into reservoirs where I could store water on my own land and guarantee my water supply. Regardless of what the government did with the public's water, I would know that I had my own water supply. It's a very easy solution. There's a surplus anyway. Mike Holiday hits it here also. In water for our drinking supply. The environment and the public drinking supply absolutely should come before private interests.
Yep.
It's the hard truth. All right, so
except for Chris, there's an exception, because if you're a private interest and you make a bunch of political contributions, then you should get whatever you want, right? Isn't that the way it works?
Yeah, right.
That's
the way it is working.
I mean, that's what most of the citrus growers did. You're absolutely right. We have a ton of friends in the citrus industry, and every one of those groves has reservoir on their properties, multiple on a lot of them, where they store water, not only their runoff, but rainwater and water they take in, so that they know they have a water supply. They're, look, yeah, a perfect world, you get to grow product on 100% of your property because you're relying on the public's water supply to guarantee your irrigation, but that's not fair. Take 40% of your property and store your own water on there, and you don't have to rely on us, and the environment doesn't have to be put in second place.
Well, and the flip side of the story is that during wet years, the Everglades agricultural area is maintained perfectly dry. That soil is flawlessly dry. Sugar likes a nice deep, dry root bed. Like, I had a conversation with Lieutenant Colonel Reynolds, and I'll do my best to remember the way she worded it. But basically, I asked her how the Army Corps defined flooding, because in my mind, flood control, flood protection, when I think of flooding, I think of somebody's dog floating down the street and cars drifting away. And she explained that based on a very old mandate for flood control and protection of agriculture that the Army Corps is bound to use right now, even just threatening to flood and then the soil starting to get saturated and wet is grounds for flood protection action. So, I mean, I feel like if you're a Midwest corn farmer and it rains a lot and your corn floods, there's nobody there on the government dime running pumps to clean out and dry out your fields. So this EAA system, it's got to change. We can't keep using federal dollars and sacrificing the health of the environment to provide absolutely flawless growing conditions every year, all year, no matter what the conditions are. That's not sustainable. And on both sides of it, dry year and wet year, it's having tremendous impacts on our environment.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And
meanwhile, if that same thing happens in my yard and my plants are all underwater, nobody's coming to help me there. I mean, I got mangoes, I got bananas, pineapples, I got sugar cane right over there. Growing right in my yard. I do. I'll show it to you. It's right here.
A couple of years ago.
Wait a minute. Daniel Andrews admits that he grows sugar cane. A couple of years ago,
when the water conservation areas were way too full. And,
right here.
Yep, there it is. Little
my
known
mango
fact.
plants, all these things.
And
we get flooded all the time out here.
Little known fact that Daniel is actually a sugar farmer.
Yep, I got all kinds of plants going here. We got 15 different kinds of mangoes now.
Well,
wow.
You know, a few years ago, you know, the water conservation areas were super full, and the wildlife, you know, the deer were standing up on the levees and, you know, whatever. But even during that time, the EAA was provided optimum drainage, and that water ultimately was filling up the water conservation areas. It's just, it's time to start putting the environment, public safety, public water supply before private entities. It's just, it only makes common sense. And the only way that happens is when the public and the people who rely on those ecosystems and rely on the public water for their drinking water stand up and make their voices heard. I got a cameo for you guys. We've had we're almost to, we're at 7:30. So these things rip by pretty quick, but we've had some.
Where's your show and tell, Zach?
Yeah, we've always had.
Hang on.
I'm gonna show you. This is my pup here. This is Sasha.
Sasha, what up, Sasha?
This is Sasha. Sasha is American Dingo, and she's 10 years old. And I actually just, we've had her for 2 years now. We rescued her from the Gulf Coast Humane Society. She had, at 10 years old, so I guess she's like maybe 12 years old now or 11. But when she was about 10 years, her owners had to give her up, which I could not imagine doing. But that happened. And when we went to the pound, all the dogs kind of were coming up to the gates and you know, wagging her tail, and now she's talking to me. But she laid in her bed and wouldn't even acknowledge. It was like she completely had given up hope and was heartbroken. It was crazy. She wouldn't even like interact with you. So we adopted her, brought her home, and she kind of was that same thing. We just thought maybe she's just an old, tired dog, and that was her mannerisms. And one day, about 3 weeks later, I came home, and it was like a different animal. Like a light switch went off, and she had accepted that she was not going back there, and she had a home, and she was like super excited and jumping around. And now you can hear her talking in the background. She's all vocal, and she's pretty cool. But yep, we rescued her. She's a sweetheart. Rescued an old lady from the pound. And Zach, you got a damn coral snake. Be careful.
Well, geez, man, I was all excited to say that my dog's cooler than your dog, but I think Chris's story wins. So I'm gonna put this girl away. I'm a fish biologist, but I'm a reptile and amphibian hobbyist, and this is one of my snakes. This is a scarlet king snake. This is one of the snakes that mimics a coral snake. So I just figured this is kind of a cool thing. A lot of people have seen pictures of these, but this is one of my little buddies here. So I'm going to put her back. She doesn't particularly like being held, so I'm going to put her.
Tell us the.
She's all about the camera.
Yeah,
she's pretty narcissistic.
Tell us about the identifying marks there to identify a coral snake to a king snake.
It's tough. So Florida has 3 different snakes that are red, yellow, and black. We've got the venomous coral snake, which is a relative of the cobra. We've got the non-venomous scarlet king snake that I just showed you, and then we've got another non-venomous snake just called the scarlet snake. And on a coral snake, the red bands are bordered by yellow. On a scarlet king snake, the red bands are bordered by black. I learned it as a little kid: red touch yellow, kill a fellow; red touch black, safe for Zach. Right? A lot of snake people don't like that because apparently, even though it's like a 7-syllable rhyme, people forget it and get bitten all the time. And there's some great videos on YouTube of people holding coral snakes saying that they're scarlet king snakes. And thankfully, coral snakes don't bite a whole lot, but invariably somebody gets chomped. The other problem is coral snakes can have variable patterns. Not so much here in Florida, but man, if you're in like Texas, they've got these crazy coral snakes that don't look anything like ours. And then when you get into Central and South America, their coral snakes look nothing like Florida coral snakes. But in general, in Florida, if you learn the whole red touch yellow, kill a fellow, red touch black, safe for Jack or Zach, you'll be okay. Really, the best thing though is just look at a bunch of pictures of snakes. They look different. I mean, they got the same colors, but they really don't look a whole lot alike.
I got a theory that I employ. It's called "Stay the hell away from snakes."
It works, man. I'm around snakes all the time. I do. In addition to fishing and diving and just being out in the outdoors, I spent a lot of time in the Everglades and Big Cypress and Fakahatchee, like way off the beaten path. And I've never had a negative encounter. These things, they're so victimized by storytelling. You learn these things from grandma and grandpa and great grandma about the snake that chased someone or the one that jumped out of a tree and grabbed you by the nose. Most of it's just garbage. And I've never had a snake chase me. I've never had a snake go after me. I've never been bitten by a snake.
They're usually trying to get the hell away from you.
Yeah. I mean, I've been bitten by plenty of snakes, and every single one of them was a snake that I was trying to grab to take a picture with, and it decided it didn't particularly want to be manhandled by me. So
yeah, the public's actually been bitten by a lot of snakes in the past. They're called politicians. You know what? All right. We're 7:30 now. Zach, we appreciate you joining us. It's funny, every time we do one of these things, we could probably go on for hours and hours. There's that much to talk about, but hopefully, everybody finds these educational and interesting and maybe entertaining. I know we really appreciate you guys taking your time to come on here and join us, and everybody else taking their time to jump on and watch and send comments. Hope that we get to keep doing these. We got a lot more topics that we're gonna hit, and we're gonna keep these coming. Just want to say thanks a lot, Zach, for your time, and thanks for everybody for tuning in. And we hope that everybody is being smart, using common sense, staying safe. Hopefully we get our guides and our small businesses back to work here sooner than later. But that being said, hopefully as that happens, people really use common sense, and we don't do things and take unnecessary risks. And we all come out of this for the better and on the road to recovery. So appreciate
definitely so. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us, Zach. And I almost called you Jack from the whole snake analogy thing.
It's all right.
Thanks for joining us. I think this is really informative. And stay safe, everybody. Don't catch the Rona.
Real quick before we go, I just want to mention that I've had a real privilege being close to you guys pretty much from the start of Captains for Clean Water, and I mean it when I say you have done more for the health of Florida's waters in the last couple of years than anybody in decades before. We've had some amazing environmental leaders in Florida in the past, but Daniel and Chris have just done so much to bring together a diverse group of people, a diverse group of businesses and influencers, and the impact has been real and it's been palpable. And then one last thing, I know we talked a lot about learning tonight. Florida Oceanographic Society is trying to do our very best. Ooh, I think I just said breast. Florida Oceanographic Society is trying to do our very best to educate you guys while we're living in this kind of new normal. So if you're interested, swing by our website, floridaocean.org. We've got a learning tab or a kind of an educational tab set up. You can visit us on Facebook as well. I'm doing live webinars. I did one yesterday on the science behind oyster restoration, and a video version of that will be available if you want to watch it at a later date. And then I've got one scheduled for Friday, May 8th. We're going to talk all about algae blooms and Florida's water issues. And then I've got another one on May 15th. It's Endangered Species Day, so we're going to do a live lecture on sea turtle biology and conservation. So if you guys are looking for something cool to do, we'll be announcing the actual schedule of some of these lectures in the next day or two. Check us out on Facebook, and we'd love to teach you a little bit more about the environment.
Yeah, that's a great point, Zach. Almost everybody watching here, people around the state, around the country for that matter, they're homeschooling teachers now. And so what a better opportunity. You have your kids you're teaching them at home, and you're teaching them about all the stuff that has been sent over digitally from their teachers at school. But here's an opportunity for you to kind of do your part as a teacher, as a parent. Log on, interact with Zach's presentations and educational stuff there. I know when I was a kid, I grew up on Sanibel Island, and there was a huge emphasis on marine life, and there was Sanibel Sea School that we would go to, and that stuff really had an impact and had a major impact on shaping my life as an adult. So I think it's a good opportunity for people teaching their kids at home right now to utilize Zach and their organization as a great tool to give your kids a cool new piece of education. So definitely.
Yeah, and what's the website again, Zach?
Yeah, it's www.floridaocean, all spelled out, .org. FloridaOcean.org. You can also look us up on Facebook, Florida Oceanographic Society. I'm doing these lectures for adults primarily, but they're relevant for kids as well. I've streamed directly into classrooms, doing live lectures straight into virtual classrooms using Zoom. We're also creating online activity packets for families, age-appropriate lessons about mangroves and seagrasses and sharks and rays and sea turtles. So all this stuff's available on our website. You can download it and have your kids work on it from home. You can check out all these live webinars that we're doing, and hopefully we'll come out of this stronger, and we'll learn a lot about resilience for sure.
Yeah, and I just want to give one more little plug there for FOS. Captains for Clean Water was lucky through this coronavirus. Our gala was March 6th, right before the shit hit the fan and stuff got real crazy with all this. I mean, we would never have been able to have it if it was even a week or two later. And nonprofits, it's really challenging, the whole funding thing. And Florida Oceanographic, y'all's gala got canceled. So if anybody watching on here happens to have an extra $1 million laying around, my guess is if you go to floridaocean.org, there's somewhere that you can dispose of that and, help make the efforts that Dr. Zach Judd and Mark Perry and everybody else at Florida Oceanographic are doing. They're a great partner. We love working with Florida Oceanographic. And, like I said, it was a huge, hit for a lot of nonprofits, FOS included. So if you do have the capacity, especially to some of these organizations whose fundraising efforts, like all of them, I mean, I can tell you from our perspective, our fundraising, it's been a lot more challenging. Nobody has money to give away right now, but if you do, I mean, especially those groups that weren't able to have a gala this year, Bentley says go on there and donate, and if you got a friend later out with an extra $1 million, that's the place to put it.
Even $5, $10, go on, take advantage of these lectures that Zach's doing, and donate $20 to the kitty. It'll add up. It'll help out. One of the things that's our strength is our communities here around Florida really standing together and helping people out. We see that happen after hurricanes. We see it happen after natural disasters. We're seeing it happen right now with coronavirus and restaurant owners opening up and acting and turning into food banks to provide food for their communities. There's a ton of outreach that happens. Our communities are huge about supporting each other through this. It's important that we support our fishing guides and our hospitality workers and also the nonprofits. So jump on over there, get schooled by Zach, and leave him a few dollars to keep the efforts going. All right, guys, we'll go and log off. Hope you guys have a great Thursday night. I think it's Thursday. Oh, it's quarantine.
Yeah, something like that.
Doesn't really matter.
It's within like 7 days of a Thursday, so you're good.
Yeah, we're good.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight.
All
See you guys.
Yep. Thanks, y'all.